What's up, guys? I'm back with another video, and today I have a very special guest, but for real this time. I have James Ark with me. Say hi.
Hello.
So, for those of you who don't know James, he is one of the most accomplished Edison and Goat players, among other formats. Top 64 at Nats 2010, right?
32, but
32.
okay.
Oh, that's even better. Frog FTK, right? Yeah.
Yes, correct.
And he's been number one on the format library ladders several times in multiple formats, not just Goat and Edison, Providence. You were number one in Tengu Plant, weren't you?
I think at one point I won one of the tournaments. I think I was number one too. I'm coming for that hat number one, by the way. Ultra Plant, what up?
Yeah, so one of the main things I want to talk about is that I think is really important in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's obviously gotten you into this position of being such a well-regarded player. Is your deck building. So
yeah,
when you make a deck, what's the first thing you think about for is it format specific or just?
Well, I guess for me personally, it's always starting with an idea, right? And that sounds pretty overly broad, but
yeah.
What I mean by that is I can look at there's all these inputs, a deck that just topped a recent event, or a meta trend I see from a recent event, or a cool card that I'm interested in that I don't think the interactions are being explored enough, or just some combo that I think of. It's like any one of those things can be a point of inspiration, and usually the fact that I think something is worth exploring at a given moment, because of a meta trend, or just this thing has fallen out of favor, or a lot of people aren't siding for this thing, so I'll try this. I'm kind of, I think, a very go against the grain type of person.
Mm-hmm.
If I see a lot of people are using one deck, rather than necessarily unless I have a really, really good idea of oh, I can use this deck, perceived best deck, and have a really unique or strong plan for the mirror, I'm much more likely to figure out another archetype that I think counters it, and I'm hedge for the rest of the field. So but it's always just some point of general inspiration of I'm interested in this, or I think this isn't being explored enough, or whatever, and then I kind of get to work.
Right. I remember when I first kind of met you in Goat format, you were I don't think you were in format library yet. I think you mostly just played on Goat rated ladder, and then you joined format library and started doing stuff there. You were playing Warriors a lot. Because it was a very turbo heavy format at the time, and of course it still is. I mean, turbo is pretty much the generally perceived best deck of Goat, but you were playing a Warrior deck with flip monsters.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, I don't want to correct you too much, but I think at that moment in particular, it was definitely very turbo heavy. I mean, it is always going to be, probably, but that was right after and right around the time of 2020 Worlds, and even though Turbo won that event, a lot of the perceived best players were still very much on the chaos control train, or Goat meta type decks, and even to this day, it's a big a kind of well, I would say misconception that it's this weird triangle format, that it's Warrior beats Turbo, but Control beats Warrior. And at the time, I was actually playing a lot of Control, Chaos Control, or other control decks, but I was still having a really hard time with Warrior. And another big part of, I guess, deck building or motivator for me is if I see myself having a problem in a certain matchup, or I see another deck doing well, and usually if I'm watching someone's replays, and I watch them and they're not playing what I would see as optimally, then, but they're still doing really well, or doing well against me, or just doing well against the field. That's a big motivator for me, because I'm like, well, there's probably something to this, and like if I can take it a little further, just kind of like due to some technical play or like improving the deck a little bit or whatever, then maybe I really have something on my hands. And that's really how Warrior was at the time for me, because like I was just seeing Warrior performing really well even against like the matchups it was supposed to lose to. But you got to also really remember that at that time, like what we think of as the very, very standard, like if you look at all the topping Warrior lists right now, they're literally like 3 card difference. Like there's really not much flexibility in the Warrior main deck. I don't know, that's a kind of broader discussion, but like literally the standard Warrior lineup of like 3 Blade Knight, 1 Dawn, 1 Exiled, 1 Warrior Lady, 1 Sasuke. Did I say Exiled? I don't know. Like maybe I'm missing one, but like the lineup that literally every deck plays now. Some people go to 2 Sasuke, some people like prior to me building that deck, and I'm not saying I started it because I didn't, but right around the same time, like LeBounty and a few other people were all using Warrior lists, picking up Warriors and using basically that same Warrior lineup. So the thing is, like at the moment that I picked it up, there like wasn't really a standard Warrior list except for Geist's beforehand, but his was way different. Like his was built for a completely control meta and just like built really differently. So that's kind of what I mean by like taking a situation where like that's inspiring to me, because it's like, oh, like I know this deck is probably pretty good, but there's not really a standardized list of it yet. Like, let me try to figure that out. You know, that's like a big motivator for me as well.
Yeah. Also around this time, you know, we had a lot of turbo meta, obviously, but the monster lineup was not standardized. Like when you look at turbo lists now, the monsters and spells are just the same in every list. It's people just messing with the trap cards.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
And if I'm not mistaken, then you were also one of the first people with turbo to use this, at least like 19 or 20 of these monsters.
Yeah, the 20 monster list with like double upstart card D, seven traps or whatever. Like I won the FLC at the start of last year, and around this time last year, and that kind of like, I mean, I don't know. I don't like to like center myself completely, even though that's probably going to be a lot of the conversation. But yeah, I mean, that definitely I think set the tone for like the rest of the year, basically, as far as like those lists stopping. And literally, because I gave AJT my list a couple months later, and he won with it again. Like it's like card for card, like what, 1 card different? Like and it was literally the list I sent him that morning.
Yeah, the 1 solemn, the 1 dust shoot, kind of hedging for like, you know, like your opening hands, you don't really want multiple solemns because then you're kind of forced to set everything, or you just have a bunch of dead cards and you get down on life points very early. So you had this idea for, you know, you only play 1 solemn, you only need 1 of it, and I remember talking to you a lot about that too. In another format tournament, I employed that idea, and I went 7-0 in Swiss with the deck that I played that idea, and it's obviously a really good it's like really good theory on how to use solemn, because I'm not anywhere close to a player like as you are, but like when you have like these theories that like someone tells you and then all of a sudden they just start putting in work, it obviously matters how you play, but like it's just kind of like, you know, just strict proof that like these kinds of things work.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I hope we can touch on a bit, because I'm just a big proponent of like, I don't know, your own experience using a deck. I mean, there's like a lot of gaps in between that where it's like, if you're not really playing perfectly, you might get I don't know what the word is, like a false positive, you know, like you might get the wrong feedback, like you might jump to the wrong conclusions, and like knowing how to kind of like interpret your match results and your experiences in the game, as far as like how to apply that to change your deck, is like, I think a massive part of being a good player. But at the same time, like I just it really, I guess, grinds my gears like when people in these Discord servers, like, you know, some guy and maybe you can tell they're not so experienced or something like that, but some guy's like, yeah, I tried this deck and like, you know, I found these cards to be really bricky, and so I cut them. And everyone's like, how could you cut that? Whatever, you know, And it's like, I mean, obviously everything within reason. Like, I'm not. If someone says, yeah, the Dark Armed is bricky, I'm going to cut it from value, I'd be like, well, you're wrong.
Yeah, you just half the games like, of value wins are because you draw Dark Armed. It feels like.
But at the same time, like, I don't know. I think things are a lot more malleable than people realize, and also I'm a big fan of kind of like, at least in like a public Discord discussion, kind of like meeting people where they're at, because like, like at the highest levels of competition, if I'm talking to the small circle of people that I talk to about the game, like, and we're very critical of every card choice and every play and like whatever, then like, yeah, maybe you can get into like a little bit more of a technical discussion of the pros and cons of these things. But on like for a lot of these public Discords, you know, it's people that are taking this game like middling amounts of seriously, and like, you know, if they go like X and 2 at a big event, they're like pretty pleased about it. If they can like win a local once a month, they're like pretty pleased about it. And for that kind of person, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way at all, but it's just like, for that kind of person, like, yeah, man, if something's bricking for you and you're not like vibing with it, then like, don't play it. Like, I don't think it's worth having the like, I don't know, super big brain discussion about like how optimal things aren't, because also then it just, the whole situation bothers me, because then it's like people are giving weird false justifications for why the person should use the thing, and like the person's like fighting them, and then everyone's getting mad at each other, and just like, what the hell are we talking about?
But on the topic of like the hyper competitive stuff, where you are, you know, very critical of, you know, all the card choices. One thing that I was talking about in my last video actually on deck building, I was like, whenever you take a list for something, and you're going to practice the deck, it really shouldn't be like finding the cards that you want to change or that don't work. You should be, you know, working on, you know, like, if that list won an event, obviously the person was doing something right in their games, you know? So it's like...
yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the list may not be optimal, but, like, you should mostly be focusing on, like, tightening up your play and figuring out why those cards are in the deck, rather than, like, thinking about cutting them.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I mean... I think there are a lot of really bad decks that win in top events, and you can kind of eye test and think like, oh, that ratio seems a little funky. But I kind of agree. Usually if I straight up take someone's list, which I do, you know, often enough, just to test stuff out, like, I usually try to like resist the urge to make any changes for probably like 10 matches or so. Maybe that's what you're talking about. Like, I really try to like, especially if it's someone I respect, if it's someone that I just took their list and I'm like, I'm gonna just make some improvements anyway, you know, then that's one thing. But if it's someone that I think clearly put thought into the list, I'm like, if it's something that I don't immediately understand, yeah, I mean, my first reaction isn't necessarily to change it. It's like, let me try this out and see if they're seeing something that I'm not seeing. I gotta say, usually they aren't, and usually like, but like usually I'll be like, yeah, okay, I was right. My first impression was right. But at the same time, I think it's important to do that, and like, also even like actually a pretty good example is like the Solstice hero list, which I'm still a bit zombie hero list. I'm still a big fan of that list. It served me well this summer. I used it in a bunch of tournaments, and that was a case where, like, I was looking at that list, and also I knew that I was going to be going up against some like Black Wings and things like that, and I was like, oh, like it seems like the four recruiters seems really high. Like, not playing Sangan seems really crazy.
Right,
and you know, like Sangan good, like
about, actually, but go on.
Sorry. Yeah. That was just my initial impression on seeing the deck. Like, Sangan good. Like, what the hell is this guy thinking? You know, and I I think I switched around some stuff, and I played like 3 upstart, and I cut the tomatoes or something like that. And I can't remember if that's exactly what I did, but anyway, I just shifted some stuff around with the deck, and I did okay with it. I did pretty well with it actually, but I ended up kind of through playing the deck, like realizing that the tomato did have value, and like the Sangan, if you add the tomatoes back, the Sangan does look a little weak, and like, you know, just these various things. And so that I think was a case where it's like I basically ended up returning to the original list. And I think that, yeah, I mean, if anything, that's just the case for like not getting like stuck in your own ideas, and like being like real with yourself. If you start, like, if you think you have a good idea on how to like fix a deck or build a deck or whatever, and you try it for a little while, then you just realize that like actually like my like unique funny idea, like it wasn't correct, and I got to go back to the original thing.
The thing that I always talked to Silchus about for Songan was that like it gives Tomato this additional value, it gives Tomato the additional value of being able to search Diva rather than just getting Goblin Zombie or Reaper, and it also like opens up level 5 access, because like Android's like pretty good against Value Turbo and stuff like that, but yeah, the more you play the list, the more it's like, I mean, you got 3 Diva, you're probably going to draw it. Going like Songan for Goblin Zombie instead of directly into Goblin Zombie is always slow and like really just unimpressive.
Yeah, I mean, you probably realistically would max Pyramid before you'd play Sangan at this point. Like, I mean, like Sangan into Diva, like you're still down.
You're still down with Solomon because you don't have the field presence.
Yeah, but it's not bad. I mean, and like in the grindier lists that like also play Gale, and like, or maybe they play Econ or like whatever. Like, yeah, I can understand the Sangan. It's not bad, but it took a little bit of play. That is a case where it took a little bit of playing for me to be like, you know, break the preconceived notion that like Sangan should obviously be in this kind of like grindy dark deck.
Yeah, and I think it's like a lot of the things where people are, they think that they're like, you know, like seeing something that like the original person didn't, but like, I mean, Silchus is a very good player. He's obviously gone through the phase of playing Songan like you did and seeing like, this never does anything, like, you know, stuff like that.
There's also a pretty, I mean, with that in particular, like, there's a pretty big shift since even like I had started playing Edison, just on Dueling Book and stuff, because like, as opposed to then where there were just a lot of different like Synchro Cat based decks, or like Quick Draw, you know, kind of like historical Edison decks that are almost always maxing Raikou, or they're playing like Spy Descendant packages. Like Sangan is like super good in those scenarios, whether to like hit into the Raikou or like bait the Descendant Pop, or like, you know, Torrential, whatever. But
those decks just aren't as common anymore.
Yeah, they're not as common, and like any deck playing Raikou, it seems like now is playing 2 or 3 hamsters. So it's like your Sangan into the face down turn 2 play becomes that much riskier. So it's like, even in value, like right of cut the Sangan. So it's just, it loses value.
Yeah, we were talking about this in the Zombie channel last night. Actually, I mentioned that Raikou alone, if you're playing it like zombies, it makes you a little soft to a mirror, not like a huge disadvantage where you just can't win or something, but it is like a little worse. But once you have a hamster in the mix, and so like things start attacking to the hamster, and then you get the Raikou, now you have the Caius online and stuff, it's like, it's actually just really, really strong. And then like in those scenarios, having Songan is just like, it's more of a liability than anything, because like, is it actually ever going to search anything? And if it does, is it going to matter? Because like they got this huge advantage out of it, you know.
For sure. I mean, like, in a lot of other decks where you, like, Sangan Searching Crow is quite good. Like, even, you know, I've been playing Twilight recently. I don't necessarily think it's a great deck, but I have been playing it. And, like, I don't know, like, Sangan Searching a Lightsworn target for your recharge is, like, quite good. Like, I don't know, like, you know, it does other things in different decks, but I
like Songan in that deck too, just because you can, you know, grab a Raikou of Arcus and you can like get the 4th name and get recharge online. It's really
exactly
good.
But in zombies, like, it's pretty easy to see how it's a little redundant, and just like the shifting nature of the format can make it a little weaker than you might initially think.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of like matchups and stuff, going back to Goat, like I remember you said when you were playing Warrior, you weren't losing to Control. Like when you were playing Control, you were losing to Warrior, and Warrior just wasn't losing Control. That's one of the things that I think is also like kind of like misunderstood about Goat format and Control decks in general. Is that like Chaos Control is a really bricky deck, and Warriors just aren't.
Yeah.
So
More or
like,
less.
yeah, I mean, like sometimes Chaos Control gets the Thunder Dragon of the BLS, and it has the Scapegoat and meta, and yeah, it's playing the game it wants to play. And Warriors are just like not super equipped to deal with that. I mean, they are when you build the deck for it, like Geist was doing. But Warriors. Yeah.
Finish what you're gonna say. I'll speak about it.
I was gonna say Warriors and Goat like kind of just beats Chaos Control even. I think Goat Control is better against Warriors because it has less like moving parts. So it's like it's just easy to get the anti-Warrior stuff going. But I feel like Warriors in Goat and like Blackwings and Edison kind of have this same thing where like it seems like they're such simple decks that don't do very much, but because they're just consistent, they pressure all these other decks. And so like when you make like your value list or zombie list or something for Edison, like I was going to ask like how you deal with like just decks that are good like that, decks that are consistent, but
like hyper aggressive decks like that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, I just want to say, like, I've definitely, like, I don't know if I can truly say, like, Warrior beats Control. Like, I've definitely lost to Control.
Oh, yeah,
like,
absolutely. It's just not like
IRL tournament.
100-0 matchup.
I played an IRL tournament. Yeah, for sure. I played an IRL tournament, and I beat a Control guy in Swiss. I think I beat multiple Control guys in Swiss, actually. But then I lost to the same guy in top 8. So it's like, and I mean, he just did, like, normal stuff, like Gorilla Sakuretsu game 2, and, like, I don't know. Like, I have a pretty cool side plan for Control nowadays that I like and I think is giving me some good results, but and even that goes back to like the flips and stuff. Like I think like being able to like stall out against a Thousand Eye and not just get like poked by like a Thousand Eyes with a Blade Knight or Kaiku attached to it or whatever, like is pretty useful. And but also people, one thing that I do in Control matchups that a lot of other people don't do, I notice, is like I'm very content to like, I don't know, like make them sit on the Thousand Eyes, just the same way I'm content to like make them sit on Spies, and like I don't in that IRL tournament in particular, there was a point where like I'm trying to remember the exact scenario, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but like I was like relatively low life, so he like swung with, he like made Thousand Eyes, took my Sasuke, like swung. I like dust tornadoed it. I think I was probably at like 4,000 or something. Like, but I was like, let me just dust tornado it now. Like, I think I didn't have any cards in hand. And I like draw Exiled Force, and like obviously I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm saying obviously, but I didn't immediately just go Exiled Force, pop the Thousand Eyes, because I was like, I can just sit here until I like draw more live cards, more defense, because obviously the problem is like once you exiled, then they're up on the summon, they summon, like they hit you, and then you're like back in the same position basically.
Yeah.
So like I could just sit there for a few more turns until I had more of a setup that I could deal with the follow up turns, and then I'm ready to kill it. Yeah. But a lot of people don't really do that.
Yeah, you don't really need to you don't need exile there until they show you the Tsukiyomi, because it's like, what are they gonna do? And that's one thing that people really misunderstand about Control, is that like a 0 attack Thousand Eyes it's the least threatening thing. They can't play. Like not every player gets to play. Just like when there are like 4 spies on the board in a turbo mirror, it's like no one's getting to play. It's fine. You can just sit there for the
I mean it totally depends on what the outs are in deck, and like, but it's like even in the case that they decide they want to tribute that for Thunder Dragon and like hit me for 16, if I exiled it then they've like lost an extra card,
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of technical play stuff that goes into things like that, but at the same time, as far as your other question about how I just deal with kind of like aggressive good stuff decks, I mean, that's sort of where like you looking at these things as sort of like a all format analysis is useful, I think, because it's like this is where people bring in like random like Magic the Gathering comparisons and things like that. But there are these like generalities of like aggro decks, combo decks, you know, control decks, things like this. And the thing is, like, a lot of these aggro decks, like whether it's Blackwings or Warriors or whatever, and Blackwing admittedly has a lot of other kind of moving pieces to it that can elevate its ceiling, especially the Greffer versions, things like this. But you even see Blackwings in Edison playing things like Smash and Ground, and that's like a pretty good example of like, you know, like literally we're one-to-one comparisons because I play Sorcerer in my value deck, right? Mm-hmm. And like anytime where like I Sorcerer your guy, and then like, and if we're like both relatively low resources, like 3 cards, like maybe hopefully they don't have a Whirlwind up, you know?
Yeah.
Like then anytime that like I Sorcerer your guy, you have to like summon a guy and Smash and Ground me, like I'm winning. Like, you know, like I'm for sure winning, you know? So like, you know, just like playing against Gladiator Beasts or things like that too, it's like if you're able to stick multiple big guys and like overwhelm them, then like the matchups are a lot less scary. And I mean, that's super oversimplified as far as like how the games actually go. Mm-hmm. And also there's a lot of, just like I'm saying, there's a lot of nuance to playing Warrior in Go. I think there's actually a lot of nuance to playing Blackwing in Edison. And like, if you watch really, really good people play it, the way that people like slow roll their Whirlwinds to make sure they're going to set up for multiple strings of searches and like clear Raikos beforehand and things like that.
Yeah.
Like those are really important things to notice. Like not just leaving your Whirlwind vulnerable, that it's just going to get like 1-for-1.
Yeah, in an IRL tournament I played recently, I actually opened double Whirlwind, but I was going second, so I only played one because he was on quick draw and I knew his set was Raiko. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just go Sirocco search for Shuro with the 1 Whirlwind, hit into a Raiko, he's going to pop it, and then I just took the game by storm the next turn because I had other Whirlwind.
Okay.
And he,
well,
I think he had storm
no. I could pick that. Okay, if he had to start it, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I could pick that one apart a little bit, but sure.
But like, I mean, there are things like there are a lot of situations where you can where you just like double Whirlwind's insane, but like it can leave you super vulnerable and stuff, or you just don't want to play it turn 1. Like if you're going first, obviously you just play it because you have no interruptions that are going to stop you. But like,
yeah, definitely. I mean, the way I lose to Blackwing a lot is just like they open the Whirlwind, they open the trap, unless they have an extra Collude I didn't know about, and I like have to take the risk and I just die.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the game. But I mean, I don't know. It's a quite linear deck in a lot of ways. So once you played against it like a billion times, it's like, I mean, you know the risks that are acceptable to take. So.
Yeah. So, given all that, like you said, you play Chaos Sorcerer in value. What's your rationale for playing cards like this? Because I know that in value you only play the 3 Raiko and the 1 Cyber Dragon as lights. Mm-hmm. So like whenever you make your value deck and you go, yeah, well, I'm going to play Chaos Sorcerer. It doesn't matter if I brick on it sometimes. Like what's, like whenever you play like 1 Cyber Dragon, like what are you thinking about whenever you play ratios like that? So, like what part of a meta is in your mind, or is it just kind of like playing the deck, like playing the deck outside of the game and just being like, well, this will be good in the deck, or is it just like some actual hedge for something? Or
yeah, well, I mean, I made the most edits to the deck like back earlier in the summer, like this past summer. And that was like I was finding that the version that I had beforehand that I had been running and like kind of was the most standardized ones, but this was also before we started doing a lot of big major tournaments. But like the double Book of Moon and things like that, like double Book of Moon, double Pressure. That was like not really serving me well against really Blackwings or Frogs. So over the next like little bit, I and also Heroes were proving to be a little more complicated than I wanted them to be. But yeah, so I kind of tried out a lot of different stuff. I was trying out like Icarus attacks. I was trying out Upstart Goblins. I was trying out Deep Prisons, of trying out, like, I mean, just all the cards that you would think to use, Dust Tornadoes, whatever. And different ratios of the Raikou stuff, hamsters, Necro Gardeners, crows, and I mean, I basically still look at all those cards as like potentials, like if I'm really reading a specific meta, or I don't know, like I think that's the thing that people have to understand. It's like, once you've kind of defined like, all right, these are the cards that are more or less my flex slots, whether that be these are what I side out, or just, that in messing with the deck, it's like, these are my 37th, 38th, and 39th, 40th cards, whatever.
Yeah.
Then that's when it is kind of a point of like, all right, well, do I want to play 2 Deep Prison, or do I want to play 1 and 1 Crow? Do I want to play the main deck Cyber Dragon and Sorcerer and Return package, or do I want to play like more defensive package with like Deep Prison and Dust Tornadoes? Like, to me, those are the decisions that are like meta calls. It's not like it's very rarely like, is value good or bad for this tournament?
Right.
Because things aren't really like I already know the matchup spreads that value has, and so like let's take for example that I was gonna say value has a bad matchup against Frog. I don't even necessarily believe that, but like let's just say that
it does.
Yeah, but let's just say that is something we're taking as the truth, right? Like that's the premise. And so, but even so, like, first of all, as we both probably can agree, Frog is not a super well represented deck in a lot of these tournaments. But at the same time, like, okay, like say there's like 8 Frogs out of a 120 person tournament, which is probably about what 10, I don't know, 10 Frogs. Like, what's like, in my mind, it's like, what's the, if I'm saying that value is a bad matchup, and but I'm not saying it's an unlosable matchup, right? Like, I'm saying it's like a, let's say 25-75, and that's way more than I actually think, but I'm just using this as an example. Like, and there's 10 Frogs in this tournament. Like, what's the point that I actually think that value is a bad deck to bring? Like, because if it randomly one tournament goes from 10 to 15 Frogs, like, I think I don't care, right? Like, I think the chances of me running into a Frog deck in bracket like have not changed that much significantly. If it goes from 10 to 20, that's a doubling. Maybe I care. If it goes from like 10 to like 50, then it's like, yeah, okay, there's a lot of Frog. I don't really want to play this deck, Yeah. But I think people really overrate the like, people get into their own heads, but people also really want to feel like they're making some kind of like informed, like astute decision. It's like, and it's like, bro, you're really just guessing. Like, like you're rolling the dice, playing these matchups, and like, also you're not even really making an educated guess, because like and people use all sorts of weird data to justify their decisions. Like, they could look at that and be like, see, there were 13 Frogs as opposed to 10. Like, there was an uptick. And it's like, bro, what the fuck are you talking about? So, like, so I don't know. People mind game themselves out of playing, like, decks that they know best all the time. But back to your original point, just, yeah, like, I rotate through all these tech choices, and then I ended up finding the Sork stuff to be pretty strong. I mean, I just think Sork is fantastic. Sork often really overperforms for me. That being said, it is a little bricky, and like I could see myself moving away from it, but I also think Return's really strong, and it plays really well with that. Right. So I think that Sork just has a lot of good applications as like a good +1 beater against the Blackwing deck, and especially the Greffer deck too, like banishing the Armed Wing so they can't get more pluses, like banishing the Greffer without going into battle. And then also against Frogs, I mean, breaking a dupe block like is still difficult for value, without, especially if you don't have like torrential. You don't always want to waste a dark arm. You don't, a dark end. You don't want to necessarily reenact their whole field and like swing into things. So I mean, like sitting on a sorcerer, like especially if it's like game 2 and you have a rogue set behind it, like these are all outing a dupe block at a +1, or like even if you use a real card in the other and like you've gone kind of neutral, like that's that's the best I got. So
yeah. And I mean, cards like that are also just like, if people don't see them coming, they can win the game on their own. Just
For sure.
People were not playing around Chaos Sorcerer for a very long time. When they were playing against Value, all of a sudden there's a Chaos Sorcerer, there's a return getting flipped into the battle phase, and they're like, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
It's definitely something that you can, at first when you start using it, just win games off of.
Yeah, I mean, I like it, and I would say I still like it. Sometimes, and also a lot of it has to do with well, two things, but like kind of like we were talking before, just like Ryko Spy hamster decks being a little less popular. Although right now there's like that Machina deck. Although the Sorcerer does banish this, whatever. But
Sorcerer Banishing Fortress isn't great, but I mean,
yeah, it's like not the worst. Yeah, exactly. But like, what am I trying to say? Yeah, like Sorcerer not playing very well early game against those types of decks was definitely a point that I did not like it before, but nowadays there's less of those decks, and there's also less main deck oppression even from the other like Blackwing and Value decks. So
yeah, I mean, people are going to side on oppression against your Value anyway. It doesn't matter if they.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, man. But yeah, exactly. Like I'm maining less. I'm only maining one oppression usually, and they're not maining less usually. So all those things I think contribute to Sork being a little better than I had initially evaluated it at.
Yeah, and I also think that like Value, since you have the hamster Ryko, the deck can survive a long game even if you open like, Dark Arm, Chaos Sorcerer, they aren't live yet. You can pretty easily work your way around that. I mean, any good mills as well. I mean, puts it live instantly. It's definitely one of the like.
Yeah, it's also a little bit of a reason that I like Charge still. I know a lot of people cut Charge, and I don't like super understand that, to be honest. Like I think it's like a good Saki card. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like if you're ever like resolving Charge, you're almost guaranteed to mill a Dark, right? And then you get the Ryko, there's your light. So it's like basically Charge auto make Sorcerer alive in a way that Hamster doesn't, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Between the Ryko and the Charge, I mean, that's six cards milled. I mean, and your deck is like, what, 20 Dark Monsters? I mean, it's like...
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so that's my justification for this. But, I mean, it changes. It changes all the time, and, like, I don't think that the other decisions people make are bad. I just think that they have a different understanding of the meta and what the deck is or isn't good against,
Yeah. That's one of the things, like you said before, people like kind of trick themselves into playing decks they aren't familiar with because of some weird meta call. But like, I mean, the past few events I've gone to, I've taken like Blackwings and Dragon Turbo, and that's two decks that know how to play really well, and just every time it's fine. Like, it doesn't matter if like you're going to run into this one bad matchup every once in a while, like.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing a hard combo deck like that, you kind of like accept the variance that like sometimes they're going to open the Dino with the Deepers and then like you don't have the out, Yeah. That's also why like I don't necessarily prefer to play those decks, even decks like Frog combo decks that I'm actually quite familiar with, because it's just like, it just gets to a point. Maybe you'll see me playing one of those decks sometimes, but it's just like, even though it's a little bit of cope or like kidding myself, it's like I don't like to not be able to play the game or like feel like I'm losing to someone that really doesn't know what they're doing just because they opened a floodgate or I bricked or something. Like this happens obviously playing like quote unquote real decks as well. But when I was using one of the Frog FTK decks, the Edison one on ladder, this was a while ago. But like, yeah, like I just played against some like Blackwing guy who like really didn't know what he was doing. Like just did everything wrong, sided really poorly, but I just like bricked and like couldn't win. And it just like, it just feels bad. Those are the moments that this happens in GOAT too, where I'll get really high on reasoning game and I'll be like, yeah, I have this new build, or like I have this like, I'm quite good at playing those decks actually. And yeah, but it'll just get to a point that like I'll be cooking with it. I'll be like 10-0 on ladder or whatever. And then I'll like just like brick and get owned by the guys like, I don't know, like Enraged Battlelocks deck. And I'm just like, all right, well, this like honestly wouldn't have happened to me if I was playing any other deck. So like, why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, the reason I loaded up Dragon Turbo was because I was like, I don't care what happens in this tournament. I just want to play a deck. I'll enter last minute, whatever. But like, I'm generally pretty good with combo decks too. I mean, when I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh, I played combo decks for literal years. It's like it's only since coming back to retro formats that I play these, quote unquote real decks, like you said. Um, and I just realized, like, losing to yourself or to someone who has no clue what they're doing just really isn't fun. And I mean, I'll still play them, obviously. Like, I mean, play Dragon Turbo. I'll play Frog decks with whatever combination of cards. I don't like the Frog OTK FTK deck that they have. I don't think it's actually like incredibly good or anything, but I could also just be playing it wrong because it's a different combo than I'm used to with Frogs. But
yeah, the newest one I don't have a ton of experience with. I've like solitaired it a few times, like the power tool symbol stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I figured it out pretty quickly, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, that one I definitely could use some more experience with, and I actually do think that, I mean, one of like the funnest parts about playing the frog deck or the fish deck or like any of these like weird decks like this is like, winning the games that you don't open full combo and you have to like grind through stuff and you have to use all these like crappy cards, like you have to like grind out with your Metabo Sharks and your Royal Swamp Eels or whatever. Like it's very satisfying to win those, I will say.
I will say I think I popped off in the Peak of the Beak tournament 3 times. Like 2 of them were probably in one match. The rest of the time I actually had to play a real game with like Drago, Wyvern control, like against Kapati's X Sabers. I bricked in game 3 and I just set Red Eyes Wyvern, and X Sabers can't beat 1600 defense, so I just like grinded them out with a real game, and it was really fun to like be like, yeah, my deck can actually win. Like it's just really satisfying.
Yeah, and I think games like that really like require a good understanding of, I don't know, how to play correctly in like a very general sense, because it's like you have to like realize what your outs are and then what they can do to stop it, and then just like, it's just like very definition of like playing to your outs, right? Where you're like, that you need to hit a starter in order to actually do anything, and so you just have to play as if that's going to happen, and like then also maybe think a few steps ahead of like, okay, well, if I do hit the starter, then like what exactly is the line? And like, so I don't know, I just think to play those situations correctly requires a pretty good understanding of the deck and the overall game.
Yeah, I definitely think that like decks like this are not like as difficult as people who play them like to say they are, like who exclusively play them, but I think they're absolutely nowhere close to as easy as people who don't play them and just complain about them think they are, because like once you don't open your combo, what are you doing? It's you actually have to play the game, and it's really difficult. So
yeah, I mean, that's a good this is my platform to rant about shit. So
yeah,
like what you just said, like things being difficult as people make them out to be, like obviously like I'm fucking jaded, and like I play all these decks, and like and really like no flex, like not even that like, oh, I'm like so insane at all these decks, but it's like I can say pretty confidently have the ability to like pick up a deck and play it pretty well, like without too much practice, and so, but it just like stresses me out because the thing that bothers me about it is like when people are gassing up how difficult X deck is or how easy this deck is. It's like, okay, like the way I thought about it, and I thought about this before I even went on this, I was like, I gotta say this line, but it's like things are both like way simpler and way more complicated than people make it out to be.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Because like look, like first of all, like there's two ways to get really good at Yu-Gi-Oh! Basically, like it's like you can like grind the shit out of like different matchups and one deck. You can like one trick it, and like you get really good at like recognizing basically like pattern recognition, like different situations and like how to do different things, and it gets very like ingrained in you. It's like you learn how many outs you have in deck and how likely it is to draw out of situations, like just based on like having been there before and like having a good general sense of it. And you might not even have the sort of like cognitive like cognition of like, oh, like here's the mathematical chance of this, but it's just like you have a sort of like internal feel of it, and that can serve you pretty well, honestly. And then like but then like as you learn to play multiple formats or other types of decks, you learn how to apply those different skills, and that's what I would say like being like actually good at the overall game is. But you can get really far with the first one, and I'm not even saying those people aren't good or something. It's just like that's like probably step one of how most people start learning about the game. And like, first of all, so that being said, like learn. Oh, sorry, you can still hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Like if you learn like the overarching skills of how to play the game and how to kind of like calculate probabilities, how to like hedge for things, how to like take calculated risks, you know, these different things, like you're applying those same skills no matter what deck you play. It's not magic. It's not like you have some like internal god of Dragon Turbo ability or like some internal like deep understanding of how the Gladiator Beast cards work or the Fairy cards work or whatever. It's like you apply the same skills, and like, yeah, maybe there's a little bit of a learning curve, but that's kind of true no matter what deck it is. And as you learn interactions and as you learn like weird rulings associated with the decks, but even those, like once you've played the game for as long as I have, and you have obviously very good knowledge of rulings too, it's like, you know, it's like the rulings aren't even, I don't know, like I know how they play the game, so it's like that stuff innately.
MMF told me something one time, and I don't know how tongue-in-cheek this really is. I have never taken it fully at face value, but I do think there's some truth to it. And he said that someone who is just generally good at Yu-Gi-Oh! Will play a deck better than someone who's been playing that deck for their entire life and done nothing else. And
well, I think it's very interesting to see those things in practice, because like that's why I actually it was a super kind of like fascinating experience for me when Edison was kind of first blossoming, and like other people were picking up Value Turbo, because this is literally like, even though I do play all these other formats and stuff, like this was literally my one trick deck. Like this is the deck I like learned inside and out and like learned how to adapt to all these different scenarios with. So watching other people pick it up, especially like I'm thinking about like Matt K, who now I've talked to quite a bit about different decks and stuff, and
very strong player.
Like, yeah, super good player, went to Worlds, everything, and like watching him play it and seeing, to be honest, there weren't a lot of differences in how we play the deck, but it just like, you know, the ways of approaching it is like super fascinating. I mean, that's Yu-Gi-Oh! At its core, like the different like ways you choose to navigate decision trees, the different kinds of reads you make, and like that's super fascinating that people of a different skill set could apply it in different ways. So that, but I think I agree with MMF. Like if you're a person that like doesn't have a very deep understanding of the game in general, but you like really pride yourself on being like, yep, I know everything about Gladiator Beasts, but then someone like me comes in and like, I don't know, just like has very, very good fundamentals and like understands all these other interactions, like you might learn something to be honest. I might learn something from you too. Like, not saying I won't, but it's just,
yeah. That was my experience with Edison at first. I've been playing Edison since like 2015, 16, whenever like the first like big revival of format. Not the big revival, but like the first one after the Duelist Ground Tournament and stuff. And I just one-trick Gladiator Beast because Frog Monarchs were everywhere, and I was like, well, this deck has an insane matchup. I'll main Smashing Ground to get rid of the Monarchs, tag off of the like the Treeborns, Rediari, Chariot, you know, like all kinds of things. I was like, oh, this is great. I love Gladiator Beast. I'm insane at Gladiator Beast. I'm such a good Gladiator Beast player. I'm killing everyone in Edison format. And then fast forward to 2019, 2020, the real Edison revival comes around. You appear, and I can't win with Gladiator Beast anymore. You blow me out of the water with the deck. Every deck that you play, including the mirror, it's just like, and I've obviously gotten a lot better since then. I
do remember the Glad mirrors. I do remember that.
Yeah, you just completely destroyed me. I was like, because I would kill everyone in a Gladiator Beast mirror. Like I felt like the king of them for Edison format. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I meet someone who's capable of playing the game at a higher level than I've ever considered.
Well, that's my secret fetish, to be honest. Is like all the people that think they're like really goated at like Teledad format, and I'm like, And like even the hat format tournament going on right now, it's like, oh, all these people like no life hat format, like, oh, you have your little hat format server, oh, let's play because like we're about to see. And believe me, I love nothing more than to be like surprised and embarrassed, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like because I love meeting people that are better than myself, you know? Like or that have a different understanding or have practiced more or like whatever. Like the situations that my like whatever you call it fundamentals can't get me there are like super fascinating because and those are the things I learned from and like whatever. Yeah. But yeah, the hat tournament I fucking went undefeated and then I'm like, oh yeah, you guys suck, whatever.
Yeah, it's like, and that's another thing. Like a lot of people they don't like to lose, and it's. I mean, I don't like to lose. I mean, me and you are both known salty individuals, but like, but I don't mind losing if I learn something. If I lose to someone like who really truly outplayed me, like when you do, I don't care. It's like, it's a good experience to get the reps under your belt and like learn something new from someone.
Yeah, I mean, so the only thing that. Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess this just goes back to like accepting losses too, because it's like, you know, like I play a lot with like Indica as well. We just like test decks and stuff, and like, I don't know, like you know, I gotta be honest, like Edison format, there's gonna be a lot of games that like, yep, he drew the early dad and the solemn, and now
absolutely,
like you know, and like, so we might play 3 or 4 matches and like. They're pretty boring and like none of us really learned anything from it, but like that's also the game. So it's like, you know, it just like imagine you're like sitting there playing on your kitchen counter and it's like, yep, go next. It's like that also is a part of it. Once you're both playing to a very proficient level, it's like, well, that's just how it goes.
Exactly. Like I mean, I've said it before. It's not entirely like luck, but like when you're both playing equally perfectly well, I mean, it's going to be the cards drawn most of the time. It's going to be that early dark arm. It's going to be the dust shoot, and then the information carries you. It's going to be stuff like that. That's just Yu-Gi-Oh, and
yeah,
you just got to get over it.
I will just want to say, because I don't want to miss the point, but when I was saying before, like I kind of only said like half my thought of like, you know, I was saying things are like simpler than they appear. You know, it's like the ways in which. But also that things are a lot more complicated because how do I like that's the part that's kind of harder to articulate, and I don't just want to be like game's hard, you know.
Yeah.
But
even
like
you do that several other times with like card discussions. Oh, that card's good. Yeah. Just play it.
Just play it. I mean, but also game's hard. That's the thing that I also say too, because like okay, like frogs are a pretty good example, I think, because you can one trick frogs, right? And like you can have a good general understanding of multiple formats and play frogs quite proficiently. But especially the little things of I know was recently some discussions of this in the frog channels, but like little stuff like how many swaps you're leaving in deck, and like I know one guy was talking about how like he always leaves one frog in deck, so if he sets up double dupe and they rise up one of the dupes, then he can search off the dupe so that
it shuffles the dupe and you don't.
So that it shuffles. But look here, because okay, that sounds great and all, right? Like that sounds good, and like and that is smart. Like that's good to recognize the scenario that you can take this line to hedge against this thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But saying like this is what I do every time, like that's absurd. Like, you know,
what if you're not playing against a deck with Ryza in it? Do you still need to do that? Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think he would agree that against deck he knows he's not playing Ryza. Yeah. But like even against a deck playing Ryza, like you should be thinking about the risk reward between like, okay, well, what if I do draw the dead? It's not a dead, obviously, but like the dead water, like how likely is it that they're gonna Ryza me? Like if they have no Treeborn engrave, like what, that they're gonna go special swap or like Infernal Prodigy or something, like Ryza my god, like I don't know, like do I have the counter for that? Like you have to think about like, okay, even if they do that, and even if I do draw the dead dupe, like is that bad? Like, I'm still probably adding the swap back off the first dupe. So,
You can,
like,
you just
it's like,
drop it and it's not bad.
yeah. And thinking about which or how many frogs to keep in deck. I mean, stuff like leaving the frogs in deck, less relevant when you're just making double dupe. But if you're ever making dupe sub or sub dupe dupe, then like you're thinking about like, okay, well, I could just leave the unifrog in deck because then next turn I bring back the tree, I tribute off for the sub, I hit direct, whatever. Or I could leave tree swap because then like super best case scenario, I do exactly what I just said a second ago, tribute off for the unifrog. The next turn I can tribute off the tree again, or like tribute the uni main too, like get even more value. But that's where you have to think about, okay, like how all in do I want to go? Like what's the risk of me drawing these things? What are the chances that they're going to like set the oppression fresh next turn and like negate my sub and then I'm stuck with the 2 in deck? Like it's like that in particular is a quite complicated decision making tree that I would argue people get wrong all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and so like I don't know. I also feel like if we're going to talk about anything being really complicated or requiring a nuanced knowledge of the game, it shouldn't be like, oh, like this guy's really smart, he only like commits his dealk when he has a card banish. It should be like this type of stuff, it's like it's like that's complicated, and like requires situational understanding and like experienced understanding of the game, whereas like other stuff is kind of just like, I don't know, you can breeze through or feel.
Yeah. I think frogs are definitely one of the examples of like simpler but also more complicated. Just like they're like the best example because like the hero frog list, the whole point of a hero frog list is that like the best way to play against frogs often is to do like very little and not really let them get their monarchs and stuff, like let them get advantage off of it, and it kind of locks them out of summoning cards. And then the Miracle Fusion punishes like that open board stuff. That was like the thought when Ronok made the deck, and when me and him played it, it was like, well, people, if they know how to play against frogs, they're going to probably leave an open board or like just a counter to the monarch, and now the 0 comes down and they're like, oh, what do I do against this? And I always tell people Hero Frog is like the easiest frog build to play because you can not know how to play the frog part of a deck and still win just because 0 is so big and like capable of outing pretty much everything on his own. You can leave no frogs in the deck, just always make double dupe. If it gets outed, oh well, you have Miracle Fusion, all kinds of stuff like that. And it's one of those things where like when you're playing with frogs correctly, you get like a way higher ceiling out of it. But like frogs in general, I mean, they are still a very capable strategy when you play them poorly, just because Treeborn and Duplock like are just very good cards to have. So I think the frogs are like the perfect example for what we're saying here.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just can't beat them, Kaius or Rising you every turn.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, playing against those things are also very challenging. But yeah, I mean, I think that I just, that's almost the reason why I like to get my thoughts out. And I know that I can be very like protracted in text via Discord or something, but it just like, I just hate the flattening of discussion because I think there like are a lot of interesting things to discuss. And so when it's like, just comes down to like, yep, just play this build that already topped, or like, why would you do that like somewhat unorthodox play? And like, it's just like, I love an unorthodox play,
Yeah.
But like, it's gotta have tactical reasoning. Like it's like, I love to find the unique line that works in the particular scenario and is actually the best play in the scenario. But but like, I hate when I both hate when people are dismissing it because like, why would you do that? Like that's odd or whatever. But I also hate when people are just doing stuff just because they thought of it and not really thinking about, like I feel like we're getting close to the end, but I feel like I gotta say that like what, I don't even understand how people think when they're playing the game, It's like
do some of them even is the question.
I mean, sure, but clearly they do, but they just come to such wrong conclusions that I'm like, how did you come up with that one? Because, like, I look at something, and I mean, maybe this is fucking life advice too, but it's just like I look at something and I can see, like, all right, if I choose to do this first, it would be better in this scenario, but worse in this scenario. If I choose to do this, it would be better for this, but worse for this. So, but which of those two is more likely? Okay, this one, I'll go with this. Does it get interrupted? No, okay, I move on to step B, like I flowchart all this stuff out basically before I do anything, basically at the start of my turn, unless it's like really complicated. And I can also look at the whole picture of like, all right, if I do this and it doesn't get interrupted, I end on this. If I would do this and it doesn't get interrupted, it would end on this. Like, which of those two things is better? Like, which of those two things is better? And better means like so many different things. It means like more impactful this turn, like deals with this better this turn, like puts them on less outs for next turn, like conserves my resources for later in the game. So it's like there's like a lot of thinking that goes on. I mean, I'm gassing up like what might in actuality be like a Tribute Summon Kai's play, but like like I'm thinking about all these different things, but just the very basic ability to think like, all right, if I choose this line, it would be better in this scenarios, and if I choose this line, it'd be better in this scenarios. Like the very basic ability to do that is like it's literally the entire skill of the game. Like, and so when people like misjudge that essential interaction, especially in very simplified game states, like I can totally understand in complicated game states where you're not sure where they might interrupt you and you're not sure like what their back rows are or what back rows they might even be playing. Like I can totally understand messing that up, and obviously I mess those things up too all the time. But in situations that are like relatively low resource, that like you're hedging for like one or two specific things, but it's like literally situations where they're top decking and it's like, well, if I do this, I lose to 2 of their draws. But if I do this other thing, I lose to 5 of their draws,
Right.
And people will do the 5 draw option. I'm like, bro, what are we doing here? Like, what
Dude,
are we
they
doing?
have the
It's
soul
like
read
not
on
really
the
that
top
complicated.
deck.
Like that's the thing that it just like, how are we messing that up? Like, like it's one thing to have a brain fart. It's one thing like, I'm not just ragging on people's like random mistakes in unranked or even ranked games. Like people take this game different levels of seriously at different things, but like if we're actually being critical and if we're actually trying to get better, then like kind of like this is what grinds my gears,
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely had those fair share of brain farts, but like, yeah, like the entire point of the game, like all of the skill of the game is like a risk and reward analysis, basically. Like there's I mean, when you play a combo deck, there's the skill of like knowing your combo and like how to continue it through certain things. But like, I mean, individual deck skills are just, they're for the individual deck. The bread and butter of the game is like, knowing your sequencing and your risk and your reward. And
pretty much.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of replays I watch of people post where they just, mess it all up. And I mean, I won't say I'm innocent. I mess that stuff up more than you do, obviously. I mean, you are.
No, I mess stuff up all the time. I mean, but it's just,
Yeah.
I make an active effort to not mess it up.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it just, I don't know. It's sometimes hard to watch replays, and no, I'm not like, woe is me. Like it's so hard to watch, but like,
Yeah.
but it's very complicated when someone asks you to look at something sometimes because, like the way I think about it, and when I'm being a little mean or something, it's like if you've made a relatively large, no, I'm not talking about like a sequencing mistake, like you set a trap before you attacked or whatever.
Yeah.
But like if you've made like a relatively large decision-making mistake, like set the wrong monster or like search the wrong thing off a search, whatever, like every turn, and we're like 3 or 4 turns in, it's like your game has gone so radically different from how I would have played this game that it's almost like not worth talking about.
Yeah, it's impossible to tell you like any advice, because like if you like if someone like sets Vasanga instead of a hamster turn 1, which may not be the wrong play, but I mean like it just depends, depending on the hand.
Yeah.
Like let's just say that it's the wrong play,
Right.
and so they set a song instead of a hamster turn 1, but all of a sudden the opponent attacks, so that radically changes the game because you would get a Raikou out of a deck, you would have a Pop, you would have Mills. It would just you wouldn't have whatever search Songen gave you. It's like it's completely. And whatever search you wanted to get with Songen would change based on what your mills were, probably.
Yeah. And a lot of times too, like the way that comes down, like the way that actually plays out, if I'm giving someone advice, it's like okay, like I'm writing like a Discord message, right? Like it's like turn 1, I would set the hamster instead of the Sangen. Then it's like, all right, like then when you search the Sangen, even like given these situations, like given the fact that you committed to that, I would search this. Yeah. And then like on my next turn, at least I would set hamster here, but you set this instead. So it's like then we're like 2 turns removed from the hamster should have been set. It's like, so it just gets even like practically when I go through these things, it's like that's actually how it happens. It's like then it's like, well, I'm telling you like the same thing every turn that you should have done 2 turns ago. So it just, I think the degree of usefulness sort of like gets a little limited there once we're already in a.
It's kind of funny. I know you aren't like a chess guy, but I'll be looking at like like engine analysis of my game afterwards, and it wants me to make a move, and I didn't make it, and it's like, okay, well your opponent didn't make the best move either. Now it's time to make the move, and then I don't make it again. Yeah. And it's like, exactly. Okay, well, please make this move, and then like for 4 turns, I'm not making it. Like, exactly.
It's like someone like misses lethal for multiple turns in a row. It's like, well, you have it this turn, you have it this turn. If you're not going to do that, at least do this. At least do this. Like, so it's kind of impossible to analyze at a certain point. But I mean, I don't know. It's also like I've gotten maybe I can plug a little bit, but yeah, like I have done some coaching stuff. Paid, DM me. Rates are affordable, but like. And a lot of it does come down to that. So knowing how to like still give constructive feedback. And a lot of what that comes down to is not harping on like the individual decision making on any given turn, but it's like, all right, like it seems like you're having trouble recognizing kill shots that involve like, I don't know,
like destroying your own card.
Like, yeah, like bounce your own card, like you remember that you can do that and like try to keep that in mind. It's just like things like that you can notice in patterns over people's play. But, so I think it can end up being a little more productive than like super like turn by turn replay analysis. But I mean, that's also just, I think at the end of the day, experience is king. It's like, no matter how many times you tell someone like, yo, remember this, or like you should do this in this sequence, like never do this. It's like until they get either really burnt by it or they just do it like 100 times, they're just like not gonna learn.
Yeah. Those kill shots are I think they're harder for people who only play retro, honestly. Like, when did you quit playing like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh? Like 2015-ish? Like something around then? Because I know you have like hat format stuff on Dueling Network, but
Wait.
What?
Were you asking? Sorry, it just cut out for a second.
Something cut out. I said, when did you quit playing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh?
So basically 2011. That was the last like big event I went to. Constructed was like I guess it was like Providence format technically. It was literally Providence, so it was. Yeah. Then a couple years later, I like found myself like with a lot of free time, and so I was like kind of following on and off. So I played a lot on Dueling Network.
Yeah.
Didn't have that. And following that in like Shadal, but I not very much in Shadal.
Yeah, I think since. Like I was saying, like if you only play retro formats, I think it's a little harder to see kill shots like that because, like, I started playing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh around like the 2014, and with shadows and stuff. And like one of the biggest plays in Shadow was you Shadow Fusion, you make your construct to get your advantage, and then you tribute set Beast over it to get the spell back, and then you turn your opponent's Shadow Fusion off. Like that's one of the most like bread and butter plays of Shadow Mirrors, and there are a lot of kill shots in the format that. Especially if you play Burning Abyss, that would involve like popping your own cards. Like you would pop your own card, trigger your Seer, and it would come back and stuff. And so when you play a bunch of combo decks in modern formats, you're kind of like looking at killing your own things and like bouncing your own things pretty often. And so like if you only play retro, I think it can be a little difficult like to see those things. Like if you quit playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In like actual Edison, or like around 2007 or something, you come back to GOAT. And of course, if you're just good at the game and like you're thinking about these things, it doesn't matter. But like, there are definitely people like when you come from different eras of the game. I think that you just have different experiences with like making game shots out of nothing or something like that. You know, it's just a point to say. But
yeah, well, for sure. I mean, I think the way I would elaborate on that is just like I mean, going back to like thinking about like, okay, here are the different sort of like decision trees that I could make this turn. I mean, I really try to be like as broad as possible, where it's like, all right, like, I mean, within reason. I mean, it's like when people post like their opening hands or whatever, and then people meme and they're like, all right, I would set 4 of my own back row and storm. You know, like it's like, but on a certain level, like, I do consider stuff like that. Like I consider like, yeah, I don't know, like discarding my whole hand and blowing like for 1 card or like whatever. Like, you know, I very quickly usually like dismiss those ideas, but I think it's very important to have like a broader, more broad than more narrow understanding of like what is a good or bad play. And I think it's like especially evident in Go format. Like you see it a lot nowadays because people are doing stuff like playing around Minecon. It's like you might open a hand of like Kaiku to Koichi and
set
like
the Kaiku or something.
Set the Kaiku, yeah, exactly. And like, I mean, whether I think that is best, you know, whatever. But it's just like the ability to consider all these different options and not be immediately dismissive because one's like a little more non-standard. I think it's just like a really important skill to have, and that's where you would find yourself not overlooking, you know, stuff like bounce your own card or destroy your own card, you know, because it's like once those things are on the table for you, it's like, all right, I can consider them and hold them in relation to the other best play that seems a little more obvious and actually decide which one's better.
I had a kill shot in Go format once. I had to drop BLS, banish my opponent's monster, then Chaos Sorcerer, banish my own BLS, and then flip return.
Yeah.
It was like, I mean, like when you play the deck enough times, you have returns that you're like, oh yeah, that's an obvious play, but like it is a little iffy.
Like Abyss Soldier, bounce your own BLS, banish something, bounce it, double attack, then resummon a double attack. Like I don't know, there's banishing your own tokens with the Ojama tokens, banishing your own Thousand Eyes obviously comes up. Like I don't know, there's like so much. Like chaining a Regeki Break when they Wind Blast your guy so you don't redraw it. Like I don't know, just like
or chaining Regeki Break to like kill your own faith when they mind con it.
Yeah, sure. After it, yeah.
I've had is there anything else you want to talk about? Because I think I'm out of.
Yeah, I might be tapped out. I don't know. Maybe I could. I'm trying to think if I want to go on one last rant about who sucks and who's great and who's whatever.
Any tirade you want, go for it. Just.
Yeah. I'm struggling to come up with a good tirade. I mean, I think I just everything that I don't know. I really hope that people can understand that as much as I put on a persona or something, like it really doesn't always come from a place of arrogance or trying to gatekeep something or like whatever. It's like I want the game to grow. Like I want the most people to have fun with the game and try out new strategies. Like I love when new stuff gets like quote unquote discovered. You know, it bothers me when like something new like the Carpath in Rise deck. Like I don't know. I actually am kind of a fan of Inrise. Like I think Inrise is kind of a cool inclusion in that deck.
I mean, it's not even that much worse than Sorcerer because first off, it has 100 more attack. But the three light fairies, it's easy to accomplish.
Yeah, you just kind of. Yeah, I mean, I'm not mad at that at all. But I mean, when people are like, "Oh yeah, Carpath genius deck builder," like, did you see his Neospatian deck? I'm lying. I do think the Neospatian deck is cool. But like, I don't know. It's just like
it's got to be good.
But you know, it's like when people are just like gassing stuff instead of just like, all right, cool, this is a cool innovation, let's move forward. You know, maybe I'm just a little bit wanting the attention on myself too, but you know, I wish people could have a more like level-headed approach to things where it's not like, okay, this new meta trend is changing everything or like okay, Black Wings won this last tournament. That means there's going to be a 100% increase in Black Wings. It's like, what are you
It's
talking
Edison
about?
format. The Black Wings are going to be there because they're Black Wings.
Yeah, so I sometimes just wish that there was a little bit less, like, I don't know, hysteria, but yeah, rejection and reductivism as well, like just oversimplifying, even though like I do that, but a little bit the joke, you know. It's just like I just wish that people could also take each other seriously, and like really, like if some guy is coming on the Discord server and being like, hey, I don't use Discord very much, but I won my locals 3 weeks in a row with this like hero beat list or whatever, like I like actually care way more about what that person has to say than some guy that got like top 16 at like one of the like every other month online tournaments, you know? Like, I don't know, this person's like actually doing the thing in the trenches, you know? Like,
that's another thing is like, if someone doesn't use Discord, all of a sudden they're just not a good player that's worth listening to because like you've never heard of them. But like there are people that are actually insane of a game that just have not logged into Discord, and like,
yeah,
it's just really interesting to me, like
it's a bummer.
This stuff. But
it's a bummer, and those are the only that's my final rant. I just like, I don't know, it sounds very corny to just like be nicer to each other, but like I don't know, I think like being able to like look at people's ideas rather than like who it's coming from, and take people a little bit more seriously, not be so dismissive, and like even if it thing is like, yeah, it's really annoying to like if someone goes in and is like, so which one's better, the well version or the diva version?
No.
Like, you know, it's like, yeah, explaining something for the billionth time to someone, yes, that's like unnecessary, and like that you could direct them to another post that explains the same thing, like for sure. Like, don't have to waste your time.
But channel.
Yeah, exactly. The great channel. But like at the same time, you don't have to like trash the guy, or like you don't have to clown on them. And like, there's nothing I hate more than like someone who's like very, very mid at the game, like clowning someone who's like not as good at them. You know, it's just like, bro, you're really just trying to like big up yourself, even though like you suck too, by like using this other guy as fodder. Like, you both suck. Come on. Yeah. Like,
one of the things is if I'm gonna like shit talk someone's like skill at the game, or like some stupid play they made, I'll do it with the people that I know. Like, I won't do it in public because for one thing, I can easily get embarrassed. But for another thing, it's like I don't have to do that to like feel like I know how to play the game, because like I'm not like incredibly insane compared to like a bunch of people. But I mean, I'm decent. I'm a pretty good player. I have some
don't resell yourself.
But like I don't have to like. But I don't have to do something like that in public, and if I'm going to like do it in private, it's going to be like, look at how bad this play is. I'm not really going to like go super hard. I'm just going to be like, man, like this is why people don't think this deck is good or something, because the people who play like make plays like this, and I'll say something like that. But it's not like but like going at it in public is just like.
It just seems kind of silly, kind of tearing people down to build yourself up. But I mean, hey, like also at the same time, like it's Discord, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! World, like that's kind of the name of the game. So I don't know. As much as I like, would prefer it to be a little different, I'm also accepting of the reality we're in. But I mean, I don't know. I just I think everyone could probably stand to like tone it down and also just like play the damn game. You know, there's also just a lot of like random like theory and being dismissive of different ideas that like are untested, or like just dismissing things just to I don't know, like without actually giving them a try. And like we're all here to play the game. Like it costs you nothing to like load up 5 matches, you know? It's like might as well just do that.
And that's one of the things, like I really give a lot of theory, like I give theory in this game a lot more credit than like actual practice, because practice is like muddied up by people making misplays and stuff. But like if a theory is solid, I'm going to give it a chance. Like, I mean, it's like Einstein once said, if the facts don't fit the theory, change the facts. So like if a theory is good and like maybe something
I would say facts, you know.
Yeah, but
no cap. Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think that's a fine point to wind down. I mean, but at the same time, I don't know. I feel like caring too much about the Discord shit in general is like kind of a bad habit. And at the end of the day, if you just go and you play whatever tournaments, whether it's local or a cash tournament or a RBT or like whatever.
Yeah.
And like you do your thing, you know, win or lose, like that's like you're a part of the community and you're doing your thing, and like just like it is what it is, you know. Sometimes can't top every event. You like sometimes you have a great deck, you have the best deck, and you don't do well. Like I don't know, like results aren't everything, but they also aren't nothing. You know, like I don't know.
Right, yeah, and that's okay. Final point before we close it. I hate the results oriented thinking meme. People use it wrong all the time. If a deck wins 10 tournaments in a row, it's a good deck. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, I was also thinking about something beforehand, like, you know, just like the most glaring example of stuff like this is like, okay, like a deck like, and I don't mean to rip on the Carpet deck because I think it's a good deck. I'm not ripping on the Carpet deck, but like that deck wins and it's like, oh, amazing deck, like great meta call, like it won the tournament. Like that's, you know, like equating like winning the tournament to like having been a good meta call. But then like you could think of a deck that's like thought of like as a lower tier or like jankier looking deck, like, and there are plenty of them that like 12 or top 8 all the time, and it's like, oh well, that's just fluke. And it's like, well, which one is it? Like, are we going to take the results seriously or not?
If Carpath wins 0-3 instead of winning the tournament, people would look at his list and call it garbage. And so people
exactly. And it just, I don't know. Like you gotta respect the results one way or another. You can't throw out one, but call the other a good meta call. I don't know.
Like, and that's another, like, people are always like, well, I think that the Krebens deck is better than Diva. It just doesn't have a representation, so it doesn't top. And it's like, well, it has one top in like 40 tournaments. Like, there's an issue. There's an issue. It's not representation. But people are just weird. People are just weird about it.
That's my one dismissive point of the day. That deck is fucking garbage. And I hate that we've allowed it to become thought of as a somewhat real deck. Although I did lose to it at the Edison Worlds.
I mean, but you can lose. You lose to non-real decks all the time. I mean, I've been on Goat Ladder and lost to decks with like Time Wizard in them. So
I lost to Beast Mode and I lost to a guy playing the well of that deck. It was like literally like worst day of my life. But
all right.
But that's how the game goes.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Any final point?
No more final points. No more extra final points. I hope the video is a banger.
I know it will be.
I hope you're farming some good ruins or escapes or whatever it is.
I got a mining level while we were filming. So
amazing. How'd I know? That's a read. But yeah, I don't know. I hope it is informative to some people, and I don't know. Like I'm I don't know. I'm not as scary as I may seem. You know, you can DM, you can reach out. I'm not always going to send you the fully updated list. Also, I play for money all the time, so that's part of the reason why it's a self-protection thing.
Yeah.
And if you want to do that against me, you know, challenge the GOAT. Slide in there, get in there. We can run it. But yeah, like I don't know. I just enjoy playing the game a lot and care a lot about it, and I wish to see others prosper and do the same, like without any irony or ego. And it sometimes gets me heated when I lose, but also just like when I see people kind of like taking that in a different way, like whether just through like their own ego or I don't know, just through a weird like power trip thing. But yeah, good video. Hope it was enlightening for some people and hope you learned something.
All right. Thank you for being on, my man.
Yeah. Peace, man.
All right,
Have
peace.
a good one.